Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's live session, Treasurers in Conversation, Leading with Data, Automation, and Strategy. We are thrilled to have you join us today for this webinar. I'm Ed Barrie. I'm the Treasurer and Chief Product Officer at Treasury4, and I'll be your host for today's discussion. This session is being recorded, and we will share the full replay after the webinar. Attendees will also earn 1.2 CTP credits for participating in today's event. Over the next 45 minutes, we'll explore how Treasury leaders are using data, automation, and technology to create strategic value, shaping smarter, faster decision-making for their organizations. A few housekeeping items before we get started. For the best experience, feel free to switch to speaker view. If you run into technical issues, try refreshing or rejoining the session. You can submit questions anytime through the Q&A box, and we'll save time at the end to answer as many as we can. Feel free to use the chat for option in Zoom for general comments or support during the session. And now I'm going to switch to speaker introductions. I'm joined today by Matthew Phillips, who is a Senior Treasury Manager at Snyk, where he leads efforts to build a scalable treasury function that supports rapid growth and global operations. Matthew is a CPA and certified treasury professional. Matthew bridges treasury and finance through deep technical expertise and a strong accounting background. Additionally, I'm joined by Darren Felix, who is a certified treasurer and project manager with more than a decade of experience across banking, private equity, insurance, fintech, and professional services. Darren is based in London, and he's passionate about treasury transformation, helping organizations build efficient, resilient functions that drive real business impact. And I'll be your moderator. Before co-founding Treasury4, I led treasury at Tableau Software and supported its acquisition by Salesforce. I've also held treasury leadership roles at Itron and Microsoft. And across all those organizations, I've always been involved with technology, data, and driving automation. As we get started here, we're going to jump into a quick poll from the attendees, and we'd love to understand what's top of mind for you. So with that, we'll launch the poll questions. And would love to understand, what's top of mind in terms of improving your cash forecasting accuracy, maybe cash visibility and reporting, payments automation, bank connectivity and integration, or overall process efficiency and workflow optimization. So that, if you we'll pause here for a few seconds and let the attendees fill that poll out. Thanks for sharing your responses. Matthew, Darren, any quick reactions before we get started in terms of your organization and kind of what you're focused on, and anything that's been surprising to you in terms of the responses here around, kind of those 5 areas of forecasting accuracy, cash visibility, payments, connectivity and integration, and workflow. I'll start with you, Matthew. Any things that come top of mind to you?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for us is, we were lucky to be able to have access to all the bank portals. So we did have cash visibility. That was important kind of as a first step. The issue, though, is it took so long to get the data out of every single one of those portals and then actually start doing the cash forecasting and all these other things that you see listed here. So for us, it was great. We had the visibility, but we need to be much more efficient in terms of how we're getting that data. So then we can kind of move on to the next step. So it was foundational for us. And we need to put that in place in order for us to be able to scale and move forward.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing. Darren, your thoughts?
Yeah, agreed. Cash flow forecasting is obviously number one on our list of priorities. And as you can see from the data there, that's quite high on the list too. Again, for us, it seems that, well, from the list, that people are still getting bogged down with manual processes, and it seems like cash flow forecasting and that integration, like Matthew just said, we've had a lot of difficulty with our banking partners to actually get full integration into Treasury4. So that's something that I can understand being on the list there.
Fantastic. I think that the theme for every treasury these days is automation, visibility, reporting, and analytics. There's always a needs to drive improvement around that. So that's fantastic. Well, I think we'll kind of move forward here into kind of today's main discussion items here. So I think maybe in terms of thinking about your strategic priorities, how you leverage your organizations are leveraging data, AI, and automation at each of your respective companies, and just love to get your thoughts on that. So maybe Darren, we'll start with you in terms of at Redis. How are you thinking about data, AI, and automation, and kind of the intersect? Because it seems like you can't even have a conversation today in Treasury without AI being front and center. So just love to get your thoughts and what you're thinking, what you're driving at Redis, and what from a Redis perspective, how's the company thinking about AI? So I'll just turn it over to you.
Of course, yeah. So the fact that we're even having this webinar, I think, shows a massive shift in where Treasury was even, say, 5 years ago. For me, Treasury was cash, right place, right time. And I feel like the data that we're getting now and the ability to process with, say, AI tools and different kinds of functionality that AI is allowing us to do much quicker, such as, using Treasury4 and the machine learning for the forecasting side of things, I think is definitely helping us to make decisions more rapidly and more decisively. So it helps the speed of what we're doing, because obviously markets have been volatile and stuff like that. And also there's been a lot of change in the company in Redis because we're growing so fast. So for us to make those decisions and to make them with more certainty, because we have more information available, I think it's been fantastic.
Well, that's great. I think that theme is there: data, automation, visibility, and applying AI to that. So it's a journey for sure. Matthew, would love to know what you're doing at Snyk and how Snyk's thinking about this.
Yeah, I'll echo Darren's sentiments about things moving quickly and changing all the time. So for us on the Treasury front, we need to position ourselves to be to a point where we can be nimble, we can be flexible, and we can have that information kind of on demand, and be able to contribute to all of our different partners rather than us being the holdup in terms of providing that information. So I think it's kind of a snowball effect, that the faster and faster things move, the more and more we're going to be required to provide that information timely. And so for us, the big focus is that we've kind of, I guess, targeted for this year has been first the dashboard reporting. It previously, as I kind of hinted, it took us a long while to get all that information into the system and then classified. So the fact that we can now do that much more efficiently and then get that out to all of our different partners, get that out to our senior executive team, that allows them to then make those decisions more timely, but it's also more detail rich as well. We were previously using Google Sheets. And so, there's only so many ways you can build formulas in Google Sheets. And then if you want something different, you have to go back and kind of rework the entire thing. So for us, we have that nimbleness and that flexibility to say, hey, if you don't want it exactly this way, we can change that. I think the other thing that's really been important for us is having the ability to do ad hoc analyses quickly and kind of do intra-meeting requests kind of on the fly. So previously, we were, hey, we're in a meeting about intercompany, we're having a discussion about balances, accounting has the GL in front of them, Treasury, of course, has, their balances. But of course, we like to swap between, what's the functional currency, what's the reporting currency, or maybe we want to drill down into a certain day in terms of which transactions happened. All of those items would have been follow-up items for us in a previous state. So having the ability to have all that information accessible to us, and then in the meeting say, hey, it's going to take me 30 seconds. Let's pull that report or that analysis together and let's continue the discussion. We're no longer kind of that roadblock or that impediment to, hey, now we have to wait for something to come to us. It's let's just keep the conversation going within that meeting. So that hour or 30 minutes that we reserve is going to be much more efficient. I think the final thing that I'll say is forecasting has been a big focus for us. Historically, we've tried to partner with our accounting teams. We have accounting folks that are spread out globally, and we rely upon them for inputs into our forecast. The issue, though, is when you're trying to do that in Google Sheets and you're sharing access with 5 or 6 people, that becomes very cumbersome and kind of clunky. So we have viewed kind of getting access to all this information. It's helpful because you get the historical context. It's one way of interpreting the data. We've set up our rules to have that information flow through. And now really we're collaborating more with our accounting teams in terms of, hey, you don't have to worry about doing the work to set up the forecast. Now we can have the discussions about what should the forecast be, what strategic things need to be on the horizon, and let's utilize the tools and the data that we have flowing in to make those decisions in a much more timely fashion. So those have kind of been the highlights for us in terms of what we tried to focus on this year.
Well, thank you, Darren and Matthew, for sharing. There's a lot to unpack there in what each of you shared, and a couple of areas I'd like to maybe drill down a little bit is, one of them is the aspect of time, right? Because you kind of have what we're seeing, and I'd love to get your thoughts on what you're seeing, is this. Some people would say time is getting longer. It's actually getting shorter because you have real-time payments, 24/7 payments clearing, real-time liquidity. Clearly, a lot to still be determined around the use of things like stable coins and this intraday liquidity and how those are going to impact. It's interesting that the FedWire system came out and said that they're going to move to 24/6 payment clearing here in a few months. And so really, when does time end for Treasury? And so I think it actually is the kind of the reverse. You're now always on the clock effectively. And so maybe I'll just stop there and get your thoughts on how you're thinking about time in any aspects that's impacting your organization. Darren, love to start with you.
So I'm going to sound a little bit cynical, but I feel like a treasurer's job is never done. And I feel like there's never enough time in a day to do what you need to do anyway. So I feel like automation and getting to grips with the data that you actually have available to you in a meaningful way, obviously. So manipulating that data and then pushing that out to all of the respective people who require not only the data itself after you've processed it, but also your context and information. I think it takes such a long time to do that at the moment. And I feel like with the data automation and all those processes that will hopefully make things quicker, I think you're going to just about keep up with your new working day. Say if it was 24/6, I think that's where we're going to be. So from my perspective, I feel like I'm trying to push automation with every aspect of what I do from the day to day. So like with payments, we were using templates previously, and now we're using file uploads because we've got Excel workbooks that we can work in to make a format of the files that we can upload. So for us, I feel like we're just doing that just to keep our head above water at the moment. So like you said, I think the time, even though it's getting longer, there'll be a lot more processes that you actually have to do in that time. That's the way I'm seeing it anyway.
Great. Thank you. Matthew, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, in order to be a participant in this new world of having, things move so quickly, what we're talking about here, which is automation and having access to data, I think is foundational. It's going to allow you to be a participant in terms of all these, faster ways of doing business. Especially for us on a global scale, Snyk has operations globally. And so as we talk about that time horizon, shortening globally, we're going to need more access to more information quickly. And I like what Darren was saying too. It's also about making sure that information is meaningful, not just to Treasury, but making sure that your other stakeholders can access that information, but in a way that's going to be meaningful for them. So again, with those rules that you have around automation, how can you classify those transactions and build those reports and make it more efficient for everybody involved?
That's great. Drilling down a little bit into the data side, right? We think about from a Treasury perspective, there is your banking data, the balances and transactions, investments, payments, investments, foreign exchange, and that's kind of all been in the purview of Treasury and sitting in different either spreadsheets or Treasury management systems, and then part of it's in the ERP. But there's also a lot of other data in the ERP, and you were alluding to that earlier, Matthew, about things like intercompany transactions or certain journal entries and being able to see that. So I'd love to get your perspective on what are additional data types or data sources that you would like to see and have access to from a Treasury perspective. Just any thoughts that you have on kind of the data ecosystem and areas to pull in more data to give Treasury more visibility. And I'll start back with you, Matthew.
Yeah, I think when I think of the data ecosystem, I view kind of maybe your historical viewpoint of, you have your TMS, and then you have your ERP, and maybe they're each existing in their own different worlds. I think in order to bridge that gap, while you can still have each system, I think each system is going to obviously do what it's designed for best. In terms of the information, though, you can't view those as silos anymore. You have to make sure that your ERP system is sending information over to your TMS system. Then the TMS system is also likewise providing information back there. So I think it's kind of a concert of making sure that both of those systems are aligned. There's also, other payment factory solutions that are out there that may be outside your ERP. So, understanding when I'm going to process a large batch for millions of dollars, I want to know when that batch is being queued up by my AP team, and I want to make sure that's coming in as forecast data. And of course, once that information actually goes out, once that payment actually goes out the door, obviously accounting needs to process that as well. So we're all interacting with that data in terms of a life cycle of even a payment. And so all of us should have that visibility. And I want to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. We're kind of using the same language and viewing it within the same kind of structure.
That's great. I mean, I think the data ecosystem continues to evolve just as fast as the technology of AI and automation, and so it's great that you're thinking about that. Darren, how do you think about the data ecosystem at Redis, and what are things that you'd like to have in your purview from as the treasurer?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with Matthew more, actually. I think the connectivity between our systems that we've already got in place. So we use NetSuite. I would love to have like direct connectivity between Treasury4 and NetSuite. I think that would make every aspect of our data more valuable. So for example, with our forecasting that we've got in Treasury4, it'd be great that, some of the rules that we've got in the system for mapping transactions would be then verified, I guess, with what we've got in NetSuite. It would help sort of map those transactions directly. So if there was any outliers or anything differently, because the accounting team's working in NetSuite, they can actually just tally off those transactions for us with that link to each other. I think for us as well, we've got our AR system, which is Tesario. I would like to link that to Treasury4. I think the TMS is your one source of truth for a treasurer. And I feel like everything should be connected to that in one aspect or another. And I know that obviously that's probably a little bit further down the line, but that would be my ideal scenario, is having that connectivity where you've got the data and you can actually tie off the data with each other so that everyone, when I say everyone, different departments, such as your accounting team and everything like that, are all talking to each other and are talking about the same data, even though it may be linked differently, but everyone's on the same page. Everyone can draw the same data. And I think that's really important.
I think that's a really good point when you think about a transaction or some kind of record type where the representation of that record type might look one way in your ERP system, and you might also have that same transaction or data type in your treasury platform, and they each have kind of their own data set, and then they share the kind of the core of that. And what you're talking about is how do I get all of it together so I can kind of get this, I would call it elongated data record, so I can see all attributes of it all in sync, and then drive whatever analytics that each respective team or person needs around that. So I think that's definitely the direction to be going here, because there's systems like treasury systems that add certain pieces of data and provide a different view than what and maybe an ERP system does. So but that's I think some great insights there. When you think about automation and we think about kind of time, and we're all working on towards APIs or with bank connectivity, payments, API-based integration with other line of business systems. What are some of the other things that you'd like to see automation solutions around? Going back to kind of the basic blocking and tackling of treasury, maybe your thoughts on kind of legal entity management, kind of / client onboarding / KYC with your banking partners, and do you see opportunities to leverage data and automation and connectivity to improve kind of that aspect? Maybe starting with you, Darren.
Yeah, so I think having confirmations for things like, bank account balances at the end of the month for auditors, or having, confirmation of account details that you can give to clients, all that kind of stuff, having that through API connectivity, I think would make things a lot better, because I think it cuts out the communication that's not really adding any value or building a relationship with, say, your banking partners or with your clients, whatever whatever you're working with, so your suppliers as well. I think it would cut out all of that interaction that I think could be leveraged very quickly and could have on the back end that you don't have to think about, if that makes sense. So from my perspective, it would cut down on the time that you're doing things that don't improve your day-to-day operations or don't involve any improvements to project work or anything like that. So for me, that would be fantastic if that's possible.
Great. Matthew, your thoughts?
Yeah, KYC is always near and dear to my heart, and I think near and dear to everybody in Treasury's heart. Right, we're constantly going back and forth with banks in terms of opening new accounts, updating things. But what I think is really important is I think of things for like FBAR, and also maybe even just user audits. It would be great that when I'm setting up users on banking portals or we've established authorized signers with the bank, I would love to have that information tracked within the TMS system itself. So that way, when I have to do my annual user audits, it's not going through and pulling down 12 different, differently formatted reports and trying to make sense of all of those. It's having a one-stop shop globally for all my accounts to understand how have I configured things and how also do I need to potentially be on the lookout for, are there potential changes, I guess, that I should consider making? So if I have one person that's leaving the company, can I now trace through easily what are all the changes that I need to make? This person's a signer on this account. They're an approver for this account. I get that holistic view. And then when we're having discussions about, well, who's going to be the backup? Those can be much more meaningful rather than sometimes what I feel like you fall into, which is, maybe you remove a user and then it's, oh, we forgot that this person can also do this because those permissions are hard to see in the bank portal. So having that holistic view, I think would be really helpful.
Yeah, fantastic. I think those are all great use cases, especially on the kind of KYC client onboarding. Maybe seeing banks invest in something like a signatory validation API, so that you could query that and automatically reconcile your signatory records versus what the bank has on file, and that really helps across the board. Corporates, treasuries increase and enhance their internal controls, reduce fraud, and really just automate something that is historically, since almost the beginning of time, has been manual and continues to be manual. So it'd be great to see some solutions there. And I think that maybe the last topic here is AI. So just thinking about kind of what's top of mind for you as you think about AI and where you want to go with that. Darren, I would love to start with you.
So I think for AI, I know we've mentioned it previously already, but I think cash flow forecasting. So I've never had the luxury of working at a company where cash flow forecasting is 100% accurate, and I don't think probably a lot of people have. And I feel like AI could probably be used based upon the sheer data from historical information and everything that's coming in to a system like, say, Treasury4 or your ERP, could actually be used to get to the clarity and the granularity that you need to fill in that remaining 10% that you're unsure of or that you haven't got data for, just to add that, I guess that certainty that normally keeps treasurers from sleeping at night. So I feel like that's the stuff that I think that we're going to hopefully push towards, will be that AI we use to get that data and hopefully make more detailed cash flow forecasting.
Fantastic. Matthew, how are you thinking about the application of AI and maybe a couple of key use cases at Snyk?
Yeah, I think, we have been on the search for how do we deploy AI in a meaningful fashion, not just a quick lookup or a chatbot, but how is it actually going to kind of transform what we're actually doing? So this year, our biggest deployment of AI has been on the cash forecasting side. So now that we have all of our information flowing into one spot, we have it categorized in a consistent way, and we have a lot of historical data. We've actually spun up a Gemini gem that's created specifically just for forecasting. And so again, a two-person treasury team trying to work with a bunch of folks from accounting. It's difficult to try to get that information, at least as a starting point, right? It doesn't need to be perfect. I don't know if it's ever going to be perfect, but how can we get kind of a base set of here's what the forecast is going to show based upon your historical actuals? And so for us, what's really meaningful is we can quickly export the information out of Treasury4. We run that through the gem. And then within that gem, we're having those kind of baseline discussions that we'd normally have. So we're trying to eliminate the Excel work that we'd normally be doing. How do you map over banking holidays from one year to the next? increasing this by 2 or 3%, all those sorts of things, the gem can actually take care of relatively easily for us. It can also help us identify anomalies in the data and then maybe, modify those forecasts accordingly. We still want to do our review after that information has come out before we, upload it into to Treasury 4. But in terms of a meaningful improvement, in terms of getting away from the Excel gymnastics that I think a lot of us are used to doing, that's been really powerful for us. So we speed up that process. And then again, we can return back to, let's focus on what are the strategic decisions we need to make around forecasting rather than actually doing the forecasting.
Yeah, that's great. Leveraging the value that AI can provide in terms of bring that data together, synthesizing it, finding the patterns, and then surfacing that for strategic decision making and how do you optimize your decisions, I think is great. All right. Well, I think that's been some great discussion here on data, AI, and automation. Maybe switching gears here, we'd love to just maybe share 2 or 3 or 4 strategic priorities at each of your respective companies. And Darren, I'd love to start with you and what's top of mind for you and Redis for strategic priorities.
Okay, so I guess top 3. I know I've said it enough times and I sound like a broken record, but cash flow forecasting is number 1. I think everyone wants to know where their cash is and where they're going to be, say, in a week's time, 12 weeks' time. So cash flow forecasting. I think process automation. So like I said earlier about the payments, we went from entering things manually to then templates in the portals to then an Excel workbook that you just enter the amounts and it knows who you're going to pay from that. So hopefully we'll eventually get onto payments 4 as well. So that's where we're aiming towards. That's on the list. And I think thirdly would be reporting. So we've already got some reports in Treasury 4, which is being sent to different departments internally. So we've got like a disbursements report. So that goes to, say, the payroll team and also to the AP team. We've also got a collections report. So that's obviously AR, and that goes to like C-suite people as well. And then we've got like a dashboard that we're roughly putting together now at the moment, getting some feedback and basically asking how we can improve what visibility they want to see. So they're the 3 things that we're working on at the moment at Redis.
Great. I think the theme there is data, data, automation, connectivity. That's fantastic. And I'd say cash forecasting. It's always in the top 3 items. And the old adage is no CFO is ever happy with their cash flow forecast. Therefore, no treasury team is ever happy with their cash forecast. So I think that continues to hold true. Matthew, what are your and Snyk strategic priorities?
Yeah, no surprise here. I'm going to list cash forecasting as top on ours. I know I had mentioned, we're deploying AI there, but really what we're also looking to do there is transform the way that we were approaching cash forecasting. So certainly, automate what you can, but it's also kind of creating that one collaborative space where accounting can enter into Treasury 4 along with Treasury, and we can have those discussions all kind of in real time and be working with the same data set. So it's not accounting having to submit something separately. We're reviewing it, Treasury uploads it, but maybe it's slightly different than what accounting originally talked about a couple of weeks ago. It's really getting that visibility and using it as a collaborative platform, not just, hey, give Treasury all the data. It's really opening those doors to make sure that everybody else has access to that discussion as well. I think the other thing, and maybe kind of along that theme of getting access to the data, our other focus is on how do we continue leveraging the reports and the data that we have in Treasury 4 and then giving that to other stakeholders throughout Snyk, but being able to present that in a meaningful fashion that's maybe meaningful to them. And part of that has been having discussions with accounting and our FP&A team around how do we classify things and how do we make sure that we're talking about the same thing. So even something as simple as payroll. Well, payroll has different components. So how does accounting view that from the GL perspective? How is FP&A going to forecast? If they're going to give us a forecast for the next 6 months, I want to make sure that payroll number aligns with what accounting thinks that it is and what Treasury thinks that it is based upon those historical cash flows. So I think really the focus for 2026 is let's develop that common language. And once we have that common language between everybody, then we can really leverage that reporting capability, because when we submit those reports or send them out of the system, everybody knows what all that information means.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I like the idea of the context. What is the context that a stakeholder wants to see something in? And I think it was I think the great example is cash flow forecasting, because on one end you have treasury manager, cash manager who's worried and monitoring the cash forecast for maybe a specific bank account or entity to ensure the funding's there at the right time. And the liquidity is there. And then on the other spectrum, you maybe have the CFO who their view of the forecast is, what is our operating cash flow? What's our free cash flow forecast? What are our actuals, and how are we trending? How are our actuals trending to that forecast? And so you kind of have a very broad spectrum of I would say context that stakeholders have in cash flow forecasting, and the common connection here is the data and the definition around that data. So I really like your example, Matthew, on payroll. There's payroll, but what are all the key buckets within payroll? Payroll tax, employee benefits, 401k, however your organization is looking at it. Some might want to look at the inclusion of maybe stock option exercise or RSU vesting as part of payroll. Others might want to put it in the bucket of tax or financing. And so it's just, what's the definition of that, and ensuring everybody has the common language. So those are all really good examples there. Well, thank you for sharing your strategic priorities, and would love to learn a little bit more about maybe your career progression. How you found yourselves in the wonderful world of Treasury, and what why Treasury has really resonated for you. And so I'd love to I think the attendees would love to learn. How did you fall into it, and where do you kind of what's next for you? And Darren, I'd love to start with you.
Yeah, sure. So I fell into Treasury by accident, if I'm being completely honest. I did biology at university. Um, I literally, I was sleeping a lot, and my dad basically was talking to a recruiter at the bus stop and said, please, can you get my son, because he's lazy, a job? And then literally ended up applying for a role and ended up working at a clearinghouse. So I completely fell into it by accident, completely different to what I'd studied to be part of. What I liked about Treasury, I think, was that it was problem solving, but it was also the communication side of it. So I've always found it quite easy to talk about cash and like where things are meant to be and how things should be, processes, structure, organization, and I think that all leans into what a treasurer needs to be. And I think with the problem solving part of it as well, I think that just helped push me into that role and being more interested in it, because I don't think it's something that you're interested in when you first start out. I think it's something that you actually over time gain more interest in, because I think the role is so diverse every day that there's always something new to learn and something to pick up on and interact with people about. And I think that's why I like Treasury, and I've studied further in it. I've tried to do other parts of Treasury as well, like offshoots of that, so like the project management, just purely because I feel like it would help me in my career and help me to be better at what I guess I need to do in my day to day.
Great, thank you, Matthew. How'd you end up in Treasury?
Yeah, I like the term of falling in that we've been using. You fall into Treasury. I think Treasury may have been a paragraph, maybe in one of my accounting books. In college, I don't think anybody comes out of college saying, "Hey, I'm going to go into Treasury." So for me, I came out of college going down the public accounting route. Got my CPA license and thought that that was going to be the life for me. While I was in public accounting, I actually worked for worked on a lot of banks and credit unions. So I got a lot of exposure to kind of, the financial industry broadly. But of course, I kind of wanted to take a deeper dive. So my transition into Treasury was via accounting. I moved over to Costco, where they had a Treasury accounting team. It was a very small team, just focused a lot on like the disclosures and a lot of compliance aspects of Treasury. But of course, when you're sitting there in your cubicle and you're surrounded by people actually doing Treasury operations, naturally, if you're curious, you want to learn a little bit more about what they're doing. And obviously, everything they do at some point is going to impact the financial statement. So that kind of natural curiosity kind of led me into, hey, in terms of, Treasury operations and the strategic part of Treasury, that seems really interesting to me. And I think what's kept me here is I want a career where I can continue to learn and grow. I would never want something where it's, hey, here's the 10 things you need to know about Treasury. And if you know those 10 things, you're going to come in and do those 10 things every day and you're going to know it and then you can retire. I don't want that. And so I think the fact that Treasury allows you to have this kind of dynamic career where the industry is always changing, your company is always changing, and kind of like Darren was saying earlier, your job is never done. Treasury will continue to evolve and has to continue to evolve. So I kind of like that challenge that it brings, and so it's very engaging for me.
I think both have really hit on the key point of Treasury, which it's very much an experiential career path. I think you learn something new every day. There's always a greenfield opportunity, when you get in the door, so to speak, every day, to something to unearth and dig into and kind of understand and then figure out the impacts for your organization. My quick pop question to each of you: when you think about the core areas of Treasury, cash, payments, investments, FX, what area really gets you the most? What brings out your most passion? What's your favorite part of Treasury? I'll start with you, Matthew.
I remember when I first was dipping in my toe into the actual Treasury side of things, getting away from accounting. It was payments. Payments, I remember I was working through some implementations, and at the time, it seemed like the worst thing ever. There is so much information, the payment format files, how do payments actually work? What are cutoff times? All these sorts of things that I was kind of drinking out of the fire hose on. I will say, though, because I stuck with it and spent the time to learn it, I think payments is just very interesting to me. That the landscape is always constantly changing. And I think that there's a lot of technical detail that you have to know as well in order to make sure that you're setting up those systems successfully. There's, the nitty gritty details that you have to know and understand, but then it's also having the ability to translate all of that information to your other stakeholders, a lot of times outside of Treasury. Like, we work very closely with our accounts payable team, obviously. So how do you translate cutoff times and maybe why we had to format payments this way to them to make sure that they can operate the way that they need to? So I kind of like bridging that gap between, I get to know all the nitty gritty details. That's kind of fun and exciting to me, but I can also translate it and make it useful for others.
The payments is a world of nuance. So
yes,
I think that's great. That's a great example. Darren, what gets you excited in Treasury? What's your favorite kind of topical or focus area?
So following on from what Matthew said, I think the part that interests me the most, and I think makes me most excited about my role, is the fact that I have to take in all this information from different sources, from different places, in different formats. So it could be, say, our cash positions, it could be projects we're working on and we need to do these certain things, or it could be something regulatory that we need to do with, say, tax certificates in Israel, or all these different things. And I have to take that together and I have to make a coherent and concise proposal of why we should do something for someone or for some reason. So I like the fact that I am basically a processor of data in myself in a way, and I have to take that and I have to give it to all these target audiences internally. So much like connecting your TMS to your ERP, for me it's actually getting that data and actually trying to sell a case for why we need to automate payments and say use payments for. Why should we use AI for this task, and why should we use this, say, method for cash flow forecasting? It's all this kind of information, and taking that information and pushing forward a good coherent case for something. I think that's what interests me the most, and I like to talk to people anyway. So for me, it's kind of the best of both worlds, that I'm trying to push the company forward, trying to get objectives completed, not only for the team, but for the wider organization. But also I need to sell it internally or externally, say with banks that say we need funding or whatever. I enjoy that quite a lot. So that I find interesting, because no 2 days are ever the same.
I think that's actually I'm glad you shared that, because it's highlighting the importance of synthesizing all of this volume of information and then positioning it in terms of stakeholder communication to then drive the organization forward, drive some action. And so I think if I'm to read into that a little bit, it is, yes, there's all this data, but at the end of the day, human judgment still has to be applied, regardless of how AI progresses, because now you need to then take all of that and then synthesize to an outcome for the organization and get all the stakeholders on board. So that stakeholder communication is a critical soft skill set in Treasury. So thank you for sharing that. All right. Well, I think we're going to maybe move to the next slide here. We had a few questions come in ahead of time that we'd love to get your perspective on. So maybe we'll start with you, Matthew. And first question: what skill is non-negotiable in the next 12 months for a treasury team?
Yeah, I remember when I was hiring previously in my life, one of the questions we would always ask is, do you like puzzles and do you like challenges? And I think that having that kind of as that burning passion within to kind of seek out new things and seek and make that learning, unique to you. It's one thing to have somebody tell you, hey, here's how payments work or here's how this works, but I want the person that's going to go through and make the learning personal to themselves. Maybe they're going to struggle a little bit. You don't want to spin your wheels for forever, but who's going to go out kind of on their own and have that passion to learn and to continue developing along the way? Kind of like what I was talking about with why I like Treasury is, even with AI, right? You can't just say, hey, I'm going to learn, how to become a good AI prompter and I'm done. I'm good for the rest of my career. That's going to continue to change. So with all these, rapid changes that we're seeing this year and, that will continue, it's having that curiosity and that kind of, can I work with a puzzle? I may not have all the pieces, but can I figure out which pieces are missing and how do I go find those missing pieces?
That's great. Darren, what's the skill set that's non-negotiable?
I was going to say, I think Matthew stole my number one, but secondly would be communication. I think communication is so important. And I think that not only applies internally with internal stakeholders, but I think also as well with your banking partners as well, so externally too. I think it's so important. I think sometimes there's this preconception that treasurers are like back office. They don't do a lot of interaction with anyone other than just other finance people. But I feel that's not the case. I feel like the more companies that I've worked at and the more that my role has expanded, I guess, into different projects or different stages of companies, I feel like I've had to talk to more and more people. And I think, like I said earlier, about taking the data and synthesizing that into something that's coherent and actually applies to each individual person you speak to, I think is very important. So yeah, communication second, but Matthew, you're right with number one.
Thank you for sharing both of those. That's fantastic. What's one quick win that's easy to implement from a treasury perspective? Darren, hand it back to you.
Yeah, sure. So I think from my perspective, and I know this probably sounds very, very boring, but documenting and mapping out processes, procedures, who's official signers, who's payment approvers, like actually mapping what you've got, I don't know, in Visio or some kind of visualization software, and actually putting that down so that not only you can see it, but other people can see it. And then when you work with people to improve whatever you've got as your starting state, it makes your life a lot easier. And I feel as well, when, say, for payment approvers, you've got them documented and who's got what access in different banking portals. If that's all documented, if you're out sick or if someone comes in that's new, everything's there ready for you to go forward. And I feel like that saves a lot of time. And if things are stressed out, something's happening in the business or whatever, you're prepared. And I know it sounds very boring, but I think having that solid foundation of documenting everything, I think is very important.
Thank you for sharing that, because I think that gets back to kind of some of the core foundation, of treasury or even the broader finance function, is having those key processes documented so that when team members change, their change is constant. So, but new team members come in, people change roles, they have a foundation. And I know we spend a lot of time talking about AI, automation, and so forth, and those are kind of technical outcomes, but you still need that foundational, processes defined and knowing what's in place. So that's a great reminder there. Matthew, what's a quick win that from your perspective?
Yeah, I would add on to what Darren was saying. Maybe I'm a boring person too, and I like having all those things documented. I think what I find myself going back to, and it wasn't too difficult to put together, was having a quick diagram of all, maybe even just your core accounts, and understanding how do those accounts interact with one another, and also what are the key inflows and the key outflows of each of those accounts. As a bonus, you can also add maybe your fee structure, or for wires, ACH, those sorts of things on the side. But I will say that has come in handy quite a few times. We're now on our second round of setting up a payments factory, and so as part of each of those implementations that we've gone through, I have found it so useful to be able to pull that up in a meeting, sharing it sometimes with accounting, walking through and saying, well, if we want to go down this path, and based upon the limitations of that payment factory, we may need to change how we're funding our accounts. Maybe those accounts, for USD, for example, maybe they have to be domiciled in the US in order for them to draft the funds. So if that's the case, we may need to reconsider how we're going to structure things. So just having that as a quick reference, it's great for us. I use it a lot, but I think it's also impactful when you're talking with others, just to give them a visual. I think the concept of kind of an account structure can kind of be abstract to a lot of people outside of Treasury, but trying to bridge that gap in terms of, hey, here's why we set it up this way. Here's why these accounts are ZBAs and these ones are manually funded, can help us then have those strategic discussions in terms of, okay, if we want to move forward with this payments factory, here's the changes we need to make and why.
That's a fantastic example. I was talking to a longtime friend who's been in Treasury practitioner, and now he's Treasury advisory at a global bank. And he said there's 3 documents that every Treasury team should have. One is the org chart of all your legal entities and the key attributes, functional currency, domicile, all those things that you would typically see. The account map, which you just referred to, Matthew, like your schematic. How and why does money move between accounts of the organization? Like, have that documented. And then the third is like a systems diagram. What are all the systems, the sources of data? And I would say not just Treasury, but looking at it for like more like what's your whole finance technology stack, ERP, Treasury, payment operations, payment factory, investments, all those things, and how do they interrelate? And having those 3 readily available, I think then the adage that a picture paints 1,000 words couldn't be more true, because it's just right there in front of you, and any one of those 3 views becomes really important for Treasury and the broader finance teams. I think switching gears here to looking at payables and receivables. When you think about driving cash flow forecasting and automation around that, I know Darren, you talked about it earlier, connecting the ERP data. Matthew, you're alluding to it through Payment Factory. Are there any other thoughts or comments you'd like to add on to that question? I'll start with you, Darren.
Yeah, I was going to say, so we would love to get Tesario, which is our AR system. We would love to get that, say, integrated into Treasury 4. So from our perspective, this quite a manual, at the moment, it's quite manual the way things are done. And it's obviously one of the parts of the cash flow forecast that's essential to know the data and the cash that's coming in and when. Obviously, we have such a wide client base and we have such a global footprint. It's quite hard for us to forecast when certain collections are coming in. So for us, that's definitely on our list of things we would like to do. So it's a work in progress for Redis right now. But yeah, I would love to have all of that, I guess, AR process automated. So sending the invoices out, chasing up when, past due by X amount of days, what the terms, the payment information are for them, everything like that. I would love to have that automated if possible, because it just adds more clarity to what you're forecasting, basically.
Yep. Thank you, Matthew.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for us, and I liked what you said there, Darren, it's a journey, kind of, it's a progress that we're in. For us, it's really looking at that payments factory, which has been very impactful to our AP teams, having the ability to create POs, have invoices received, do that reconciliation, then make payments all from one system has been really helpful to them. What we struggle with, though, is there can be a time gap between when the batch is created for payment and then when it moves through the multiple different approval levels. And of course, when the final approver, who maybe is in the US, is approving something maybe in APJ or in the EMEA region, obviously there's a bunch of different timelines that come into play in terms of, okay, well, when do we need to have funds in place based upon their cutoff time and based upon our bank's cutoff time in terms of when we can move those funds. So I think that's going to be a core component for us in terms of if we're moving these big dollar amounts around, we want to make sure that we can get funding really just in time. We want to be efficient with our cash. So we want to know when those payments are coming down the line, and we want to know when the funds need to be there.
That's great. What are some key steps to bring stakeholders on board? I think this goes back to the stakeholder communication. I'll kick it back to you, Darren, and get your thoughts.
Yeah, that sound like a broken record again, so I apologize. But yeah, communication for sure. I don't know, like building the relationship up with people, especially internally, I think is essential to basically doing your job as a treasurer. In a previous life, I worked at a company where around religious holidays, cash was very tight. And AP would pay like clockwork. AP were super efficient. Like I couldn't fault them at all. But when I explained to them that around holidays, maybe if we could hold off certain, AP payments that we didn't need to make and we could wait till say after a religious holiday or anything like that, I think they understood. So I think it was communicating with them that they're involved in the process too. So it's not just Treasury are doing the payments. So like Treasury are doing their forecasting and then the AP team are doing payments separately. I feel like it's one process. And I think if you bring people on, people feel accountable because you've interacted with them, you've built a relationship with them. They know that the company is working in one direction. And I feel like if you bring them on for that, they feel part of something greater than themselves. And I think that's important to get people to work with you. So, for example, around the religious holidays, we ended up not paying certain AP, and then we made it through without paying any extra fees for going in overdraft. So that was kind of like, I don't know, it makes people feel part of something bigger than themselves. So
That's great. Matthew, how do you bring stakeholders on board?
Yeah, it truly is, as Darren said, about the relationship building aspect. People go into accounting thinking they don't have to talk to people maybe very much, but that is a core function of Treasury. You have to build those relationships. So what I found works really well for us is the two of us that are in Treasury, we started roughly around the same time, but when we both were onboarded, we immediately kind of went to who we knew were going to be some of our core stakeholders. And especially as you're trying to learn the business, right? We came on, there was no treasury function to inherit. We're kind of building it from the ground up. So we knew that our core, counterpart, or our core stakeholders were going to be tax and legal, at least as a starting basis. And so what we did is first couple of weeks, we introduced ourselves, made sure that we kind of explained also, what is it that Treasury is doing here at Snyk? It was a very much a foreign concept. And a lot of times you don't see Treasury with the stage and the caliber in terms of what we were brought to bring. You don't see that at a company at that stage. So it's not only, hey, we know that we're going to need some information from you and we're going to need working with you closely, but it's also let us explain what it is that we do. We're not just processing wires, we do a lot more. And once you start to bridge that gap in terms of Treasury just processes payments to Treasury can be a strategic partner, then it becomes a lot easier for that broader stakeholder group to start making sure that everybody in that group is receiving information that they may need. So as an example, right, tax may hear something that they know is going to impact Treasury. There's a payment that's due, a tax assessment or something like that. So they know to flag that for us right away. And maybe there's, legal documents that need to be signed. And so legal is also being brought in. Next week, it may be legal hears something and they're going to bring in Treasury. So it's really just building this kind of group of core stakeholders where everybody is kind of watching out for everybody as well to make sure that nothing is getting siloed. I feel like that's one of the biggest struggles is tax knows a lot, legal knows a lot, and Treasury knows a lot, but it's difficult sometimes to kind of break down those barriers and make sure that the correct information is flowing to those other individuals. So being able to deliver on that kind of teamwork aspect, I guess, of the relationship of, hey, I know I might need some stuff from you, but I'm watching out for you as well. And delivering on that consistently, I think has helped us to build those really strong relationships.
That's fantastic. That's something that AI is never going to replace. How to build relationship,
No.
build collaboration, build trust. Trust is is foundational to all of that. So I think we have maybe two more questions here, and then we'll kind of wrap up. So we'll get over to the next two ones here. And maybe starting with you, Matthew, on taking that first question in terms of impactful process automation that you've implemented.
Yeah, I think it's maybe it'll be a two-parter for me, but it's one, getting the information that we got into Treasury for having that classified, but it really is that forecasting aspect of it. We fund many of our foreign entities are cost centers, and so they just need funding. They're not bringing in revenue, so we have to fund them just in time. And so we want to make sure that we're not loading them up with excess cash from a risk standpoint. And so having this greater control that we now feel like we have in terms of what does the future actually hold, not just rolling forward last month or last quarter. And I feel like we're also breaking down some of those barriers with accounting. So rather than focusing on doing it, accounting is engaging with us more. And so we feel like we have a little bit more control over our destiny. And not that we had a lot of like payment emergencies, but it's just being more efficient with the cash that we have right now, using new ways of interpreting that data and then using the data.
It's great. Darren, how about you?
So I guess from our perspective, automating our payments, I guess, final state being obviously payments for, I guess, but even automating what we've done so far has saved a lot of time in like just setting up payments, one person reviewing, another person, then a second reviewer obviously approving them so they go out the door. I think saving the time that it's saved, I think, has really helped significantly. And I would love to have that with every process that we have in Treasury and wider finance as well. Though it's definitely improved our efficiency because obviously we're using everything that's set in spreadsheets, so nothing is editable. So all the payment details for employees, for our suppliers, etc., is all static. And I think that's helped a lot. And I think it's saved as well a lot on return payment fees. So it's actually helped quite a lot from a operational and a risk perspective. So yeah, it's definitely helped a lot.
Fantastic. I think our last question here is fraud. I think we always think about payments and fraud prevention. Treasury, is generally Treasury and AP are the last line of defense before payment goes out the door. So fraud, the sophistication of fraud continues to increase from bad actors. And so, just love to get your thoughts on maybe how AI and machine learning might be integrated across Treasury to help manage and reduce the footprint of fraud and act as a preventative. So maybe go back to you, Darren, to start with that, since payments optimization is near and dear to what you're working on.
Yeah, no, I agree. So we've been very lucky, actually. One of our banks that we work with is HSBC, and they've got this AI fraud tool that actually takes the data on you as a profiled client of theirs, and it basically works around your parameters. So for example, if I'm the one who's entering the majority of the payments for Redis, which I am, if anyone outside of that makes any payments, then it will flag as like, maybe that's something we should possibly look into. It's not part of our usual data set. Or if someone enters a payment in a country that we don't have a footprint in, that's also something else it looks into. So for us, we've been very lucky that it's actually stopped some payments going out already, which we're very happy about. It was obviously small amounts just to kind of test the water, little fishing amounts, a couple of dollars here, a couple of shekels, etc. And it's actually stopped those going through. So I think it's a different way of thinking about fraud prevention for us, which I think has been really useful so far. And I think obviously scammers are going to get better, but I think also the tools that say our banking partners will provide longer term will only get better as well. I think it's more of a rather than being proactive, I think it's reactive on the banks' part, because I think they have all these different things that are happening all the time, and I think they can only keep up so fast. But I think so far, like I said, with HSBC, we've been very lucky, and I'm very happy with what tools they've got so far.
That's fantastic to hear. Matthew, how do you think about AI in the context of fraud prevention?
Yeah, I view the deployment of AI and machine learning in the payments sphere as integral. It needs to be, it's not there yet, but it needs to be a core component with any sort of processing platform that we're talking about in the future. I think, at Snyk, we're viewing kind of having at some point here soon, having kind of two major ways of transacting. There's the payment factory solution for AP that I mentioned. And then we also want to try to get away from bank portals and consolidate that kind of within the TMS. So that way we can really just have two workflows that we're working with. And I think once you do that, then you get the benefit of adding on that additional layer of the machine learning that can go through and start to detect anomalies as you continually make payments in those one or two core systems. So rather than having to rely upon this bank has a really good, AI machine learning, this one's not so strong. I want to take all that risk and that variety away, and I want to consolidate my payment streams and then have this as that additional layer on top of it. And that way you can hopefully, you can detect anomalies more easily, and you can also force there to be additional workflow. So rather than just saying, hey, here's a flag in the bank portal, maybe you want to consider this, it's well, if this is an anomalous payment and maybe it's above XYZ dollar amount, somebody else needs to approve that. And they need to type in a description in terms of, hey, why is it appropriate for us to be making this payment? You normally make one payment a month. This is the fifth one you've made this month. Are you sure that this is legitimate? So I view it as we're creating an additional workflow that, yes, may slow some payments up, but it's necessary, because in a day and age where payment fraud becomes more and more prevalent, and the schemes become more and more prevalent, or more sophisticated, I should say, this is going to be, I think, a really key player in terms of making sure that your defenses are up.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, in the age, we started out the discussion here about real time and compression of time, but there is should be no push for organizations to just absolutely get a payment out the door as quickly as possible without going through all other requisite checks and controls and validation. So having kind of stop gates, or however you want to frame it, on those payments, and then applying layers of technology around it is kind of where the industry needs to go, and stay top of mind for Treasury. Well, thank you for sharing your perspective, Darren and Matthew. This has been really a fantastic discussion today. Both of you have shared a lot of wisdom and insight with the attendees here. Really can't thank you enough for your participation and taking an hour to spend with us, and hopefully the attendees will take a few good nuggets away from what you've shared in your experience and journey in Treasury. So thank you very much. I'll just give any final word or comment that you want to share with the attendees. Darren, I'll hand it to you.
No, I don't have anything, I guess, any wise words or anything, but I think if you have to be, if one thing for the future, I think being comfortable with change, I think, is a good way to think about Treasury going forward.
Yep. Thank you. Matthew.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I think we're certainly in an era now where things are moving very, very quickly, and there are big changes that are coming down the pike that we'll need to address much sooner rather than later. So it's having that ability to adapt and be flexible and continually kind of re-skill yourself. The skills that maybe you had building big Excel spreadsheets from years past, maybe those are going to go to the wayside, and it's going to be more focused on AI prompting and how do I make sure the data is visualized in a meaningful way. So there's a lot of changes. You just have to be up for the challenge.
Yep. Fantastic. Good words for the attendees. So thank you so much. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Darren. I really appreciate your time. And that concludes our webinar today. Thanks for attending, and we'll connect soon on a future webinar. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. And love to engage in a discussion and dialogue with you. All right. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much.